You're now listening to the Engage the Rockies podcast, your go-to podcast for local and state issues concerning Colorado.
Hello, Rockies. This is Sarah Jane Maroney, your host, and welcome to our interview this week. We're speaking with Jarvis Caldwell, State Representative for District 20. He was born in Florida and grew up in Kentucky. After high school, he joined the United States Air Force. He initially worked as an aircraft technician working on and maintaining F-15E aircraft. During his 10 years in the Air Force, he was stationed and deployed in Afghanistan, Korea, Italy, and England. Later, he switched jobs in the Air Force and joined the JAG Corps, working as a paralegal in Washington, D.C. He and his family moved to Colorado Springs in 2019. Since then, he has worked as a legislative aide at the Colorado State House and has worked as the communications director for the Colorado House Republicans. He also serves on the board of a local charter school. Jarvis has been happily married to Anne for 11 years, and they have two sons, Jackson and Colton. We welcome him. Hello, Jarvis. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's nice to be on the other side of this. And I just want to say you've been doing a great job with Engage the Rockies podcast. So thank you for that.
Thank you. That's very kind. So I guess one of the things that I'd like to start out with is kind of how you ended up on the other side of the microphone.
Yeah. So actually around the time that we started the Engage the Rockies podcast was around the same time that I had actually decided to jump in the race for House District 20. And so I was juggling both. And so doing the Engage the Rockies podcast, but also running for office at the same time. And fortunately, I won the primary in June of last year and then won the general election in November, and then had to put all my focus into what's going on at the legislature.
There's quite a lot going on. So maybe since it's already passed and Governor Polis has signed it, you could just touch for just 1 minute on the battle of SB3.
Yeah, so SB3, as I'm sure the listeners already know, this is their attempt at, I mean, they call it a lot of things, assault weapons ban, gun safety training, but the bottom line is what this does is it creates a ridiculous barrier in order to obtain 85% to 90% of the most commonly owned firearms through a licensing process that involves sheriffs. It involves the parks, Colorado Parks and Wildlife. But we fought this thing all the way through. I was in Judiciary Committee when it first came through, and I think we spent around 14 hours on that just on the House side. And then between second readings and third readings, I personally spent over 30-something hours fighting on this bill. So the governor did sign it last week, I believe on Friday. And just this week, a couple of days ago, the House Republicans, we signed a letter and did a press conference, and we sent a letter to Attorney General Pam Bondi to ask her to review this because President Trump signed an executive order not too long ago saying that they are going to be monitoring states that are infringing on people's Second Amendment rights. And so we're still waiting to hear back from the Attorney General, but that's kind of where we're at as a caucus for the next steps for SB.
I saw something recently that Minority Leader Puglisi had posted about attempting to speak with the Colorado State Supreme Court.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I believe what they're doing is we put a letter together. I think that maybe is what she's referring to, asking for a judicial review of it before it goes forward, before it's implemented, to see if it does violate any kind of laws, like current laws or obviously constitutional rights. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe that was rejected.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So, but this isn't the only bill. Has some objections to it. There's a few others. I've heard quite a lot about HB25-1312.
Yeah. So House Bill 1312, it's called the Kelly Loving Act. Kelly Loving was a transgender individual who was murdered in the Club Q shooting. But 1312, it's 9 sections long, and about 7 of the sections actually have to do with policy, creating policy. And it's all bad. The big focus that has gotten literal international attention is Section 2, which talks about custody. And just to kind of summarize it, what it says is, in a custody dispute situation, if a child has this gender identity confusion, the court is directed to give custody to the parent who affirms the gender identity confusion of the child. And the parent who doesn't go along with it is considered committing child abuse. And so what they do is they wrote into statute deadnaming and misgendering as new provisions under the child abuse law for custody situations. And I mean, if you think about the egregiousness of this, dead naming is when you call someone by their usually legal name and not the chosen name, as they call it. So if little Johnny says, I want to be called little Sally, and you're the parent, and you say, no, your name's little Johnny, then that is considered dead naming because you're not recognizing the new name that they want, that they've chosen. And it's so egregious because we're talking about your child. And so you are calling your child by the name you gave your child, and that is considered child abuse if this law passes. So that provision right there, that section 2, has really lit things on fire, and we've been getting national attention for it. And I've even seen international attention. I saw a news segment in Australia talking about this bill. So when I say the world is watching, I mean literally the world is paying attention because they know about this House Bill 1312.
And where is it now? Because it has passed out of the House, it passed out of the committee and the committee of the whole, and it's sent to the Senate, right?
Yeah. So right now we're still waiting for the Senate to introduce it. And when they introduce it into the Senate, what they'll do is they have to sign it to a committee. So it'll have to go through a Senate committee just the way it went through a House committee when it first came through. And just to kind of give the listeners, if they're unfamiliar with the process. So what happens is we call it first reading, and first reading is when the Speaker of the House introduces the bill. So when they do that, they assign it a number, and then they also assign it to a committee. So House Bill 1312 was assigned on March 28th, which was a Friday. And it was a day that we got done kind of early, around 4 p.m. And what happens is the speaker will stay behind and then do kind of, they call it, housework, house cleaning. And this is where they introduce bills and assign them and things like that. And so we all left for the day around 4 p.m. The speaker stays behind with the nonpartisan staff and starts introducing bills. And the speaker introduced House Bill 1312. Well, because it was Friday evening, people left. We weren't paying attention. So on that following Monday, we're all there. We do a full day on the floor. And then when we get done, we're kind of standing around talking. And the chairman of Judiciary, Javier Mabry, he's a Democrat from Denver. He walks up to the mic to do announcements. And he says, oh, by the way, Judiciary Committee, tomorrow we're going to also hear House Bill 1312. We're adding that to the calendar for that Tuesday, the following day. And at the time, I heard it and I didn't know what 1312 was, but because the bills go in order, they start at 1001, right? 1001 would be the first House bill of the year. 1312 means it's the 312th House bill of the year. So that signaled to me, anytime you're over 1300, those are your late bills. Those are the bills that are just getting introduced. So I knew it was something that just kind of came up recently. I didn't realize it was that Friday. So when I pulled up the bill in my office and I looked and I started reading it, I was like, what is this? Because not only does it talk about the custody issue, it talks about names in schools. It talks about dress codes, no more gender-based dress codes. It talks about the Colorado Anti-Discrimination Act as far as businesses go. So much like you saw with Jack Phillips with the cake baking for a gay couple, this basically takes that, what they attacked him on, and applies it to the transgender issue. So it's more than just the custody issue, but it's been the main focus. But the entire bill is horrible in my opinion. But to continue on kind of the process, so the following day we had the committee hearing for it on that Tuesday. And it was about 12 hours long is what the committee was. And big thanks to a lot of our parental rights groups because they got wind of this bill and they started rallying the troops on a very short notice. And so we had 120 witnesses and it was split about 50-50, the for and the against. And so what I found out in testimony was that a lot of the people there testifying in favor of the bill had known about the bill for over a year. They've been working on it for over a year, and the people against it only had less than 24 hours basically. And so I brought this up in our closing arguments, and this is about 1:00 in the morning. I brought up that, I'm curious about how this bill was stakeholder, and what I said in committee and the full length of it was, did you all talk to the businesses about this because this affects businesses under the Anti-Discrimination Act? Did you talk to the schools because you're talking about changing their dress codes and their name their name change policies? And then did you talk to the parental rights groups about this, about the custody issue? And so one of the representatives, Yara Zokai, a Democrat who was in favor of the bill, she went a couple people after me because we each had 5 minutes. So I asked my question, and then I think another Republican gave his 5-minute closing, and then Representative Zokai gave her closing. And when she gave her closing, she was addressing my concerns about stakeholdering, and she says very blatantly that we don't need a stakeholder with hate groups. And she was referring to the parental rights groups. We don't stakeholder with hate groups. We wouldn't go ask the KKK what their opinion is on civil rights legislation. And when she said it at the time, I was sitting there like, I was trying to make sure that she actually was talking to me. And then I'm wondering, I was like, did somebody else mention stakeholdering? I think I was the only one. And so that night I was laying down to go to sleep, and I just kept thinking about it. And I said, you know what? I'm going to listen back to it in the morning. And if she was talking to me, I'm going to clip my question about stakeholdering with parental rights groups, and I'm going to clip her calling parental rights groups hate groups. And I'm going to put that out there because people need to see that, because again, these comments came around 1 o'clock in the morning. Very, very few people are staying up to 1 o'clock in the morning to listen to what is going on in the House Judiciary. And this is not a unique situation. This kind of happens in every Judiciary Committee. Anytime we have a controversial bill, these kind of things get said, but people just, I understand people have their own lives and they're not paying attention, but as a representative, especially with a communications background, I kind of looked at it as, look, I need to use my skills to bring this to people's attention so they can hear about it. And so I took those clips of me saying it and her saying it, and I put it out there. And I think that's what really kind of sparked the fire, because then it just exploded. And then, big national organizations like Fox News picked it up. And I think that was a big piece of what really brought it to the attention. And also the parents' rights groups who've been doing a lot of interviews about it and talking about it. And Erin Lee has been great. And she's with the organization called CPAN. And so they cover a lot of this stuff, and she's been awesome as well.
So this is headed to the Senate, and it hasn't been assigned to a committee in the Senate, but that means that parental rights groups will have another chance to speak, and hopefully a little bit more preparation. At least we're aware of it right now.
Yeah. So they brought us in on a Sunday, by the way. So after we had Judiciary Committee on that Tuesday, the bill was brought for second readings on Friday. So second readings, that's your debate stage. That's where you offer a lot of amendments, and there's no time limit on it, and everybody gets up there and talks on it. Well, there's no time limit unless the majority enacts a procedural rule called Rule 14. So they enacted Rule 14. The majority leader, I'm trying to think of the correct phrase for it, but like offered Rule 14 or suggested Rule 14. And once that happens, then we have to vote on it. And it's just a simple majority. And because we're outnumbered in the legislature, it passed. And so with the Rule 14 that she enacted, they limited debate on House Bill 1312 to only 2 hours. Now, if you consider there's 65 members in the House of Representatives. So if you do the math on that, we each had technically less than 2 minutes. Now, not everybody goes and speaks on it. And so therefore, other people, I had more than 2 minutes to speak on it, but we were still very limited. And because that's 2 hours across the board. So if we run an amendment and we have debate on an amendment, that's counting that clock. The people in support of it, they got up there and talked on the bill. And if they wanted to, they could go up in there and talk for a full 2 hours and just hold the well the entire time and then not let any of us talk on it if they wanted to. But so 2 hours, it's not enough time to debate a bill, especially this controversial. Some bills we only debate for a couple minutes. Other bills we debate for 12, 14 hours. And this was one of those bills that we need to have a long debate on it because there's only 11 people in Judiciary Committee. And so this bill is new in a sense to everyone else on the House floor that didn't get to sit through the hearings and didn't get to have conversations on this. And so it's kind of robbing them who didn't get to sit in that committee. So we were limited to 2 hours. It passed on second reading. Then what I think is purposeful and insulting, they made us come in that Sunday instead of just coming in Monday like normal. They made us come in Sunday to vote on this bill, and along with a couple other bills that are very controversial that aren't very much talked about. But when they brought us in on Sunday, they used another procedural rule called Rule 16. And Rule 16, what that does is you vote on that as well. It's calling the question. So you do Rule 16, and it's for third readings, and there's no debate on it. You do Rule 16 and it's over. And so they used Rule 16 right at the beginning of third reading for House Bill 1312, which normally we each have 10 minutes to go up there and talk one last time on it before we vote. But because Rule 16 was enacted, it went straight to a vote. So we were robbed of that other chance to speak on it. And of course it passed. So right now, and that was a couple weeks ago, right now it's still sitting on the Senate president's desk. It has not been introduced. It has not been assigned to a committee. And I've heard rumblings behind the scenes that the Senate, they're very well aware of the blowback nationally that this bill has gotten. And so what I understand is that they're kind of using like a legal excuse, and they're saying, well, I believe it's section 4 of the bill talks about name changes in schools. Well, for people who follow this closely, last year there was a House Bill 24-39 that was called non-legal name change. And that actually addressed changing your name in school. And so what they're saying is, well, this bill is duplicative maybe because it's doing something that a bill did last year, which the reality is they do duplicative bills all the time in the legislature, and it usually doesn't hold up bills. But I think they're using that as an excuse to hold up this bill right now in the Senate. But when they do introduce it finally and they assign it to a committee, I think we might break a record for people showing up. I mean, we just had a rally yesterday, which I don't know when this is going to publish. I assume Monday. So on Thursday, which is yesterday from the time we're filming this, we had a rally against 1312, and we had probably around 300 people show up. We had pastors from all around the state. We actually had some pastors fly in from across the country, from North Carolina in one instance, and we had this huge rally there. And I think when they do sign it to a committee, now that everybody knows about it, because very few people knew about it when it went through the House, you're going to see, we might set a record for how many people show up to testify against it.
There's lots of numbers on those records. I've been to the Capitol on some of those in the past. Okay, so obviously this is something that is of interest to a lot of people, and we're waiting to see if it gets assigned. You said that you were at the Capitol on the Sunday and there were more bills. So talk me through those.
Yeah, so there was four bills in total, and there were 2 that were abortion related, and then 2 that were transgender related. So one of the abortion related ones is Senate Bill 183, and that's taxpayer funded abortions. That's what it is. Medicaid will now cover abortions, and you can even come from out of state, not even be a Colorado citizen, and not even ever pay a single tax in your life to the state of Colorado, and you can come here and get a taxpayer funded abortion paid for by the citizens of Colorado. And one of the arguments I made on this was that when Amendment 79 passed this past election, which was the constitutional change for your right to an abortion, that the blue book on that had a $0 fiscal note, and it said, this is giving you a right to an abortion with no restrictions, but it doesn't cost the state any money. And that's what people voted on for Amendment 79 this past November 2024 election. I voted against it personally just because of where I stand on the life issue. However, it did overwhelmingly pass by Colorado citizens. But again, they were voting because they thought they were just saying you have a right to access. They weren't voting on taxpayer funded. Well, the Speaker of the House brought forward this Senate Bill 183, which now makes it taxpayer funded. And so obviously, I was against it. She actually got a lot of national attention when she was in committee on this because she made this, I think, really horrible argument that this is actually saving the state money because aborting a baby is cheaper than potentially the services that have to be provided for the child if the parents are low income. And that's just, to me, it's wicked. And I'm not saying that Julie McCluskey is wicked, but that is a very wicked argument to try to make. And I think she realized after the fact when it got that much attention that maybe that wasn't a good argument, because I don't believe she made that argument again when it came to the House floor. But yeah, that was Senate Bill 183. The other bill that had to do with transgender rights, if you will, is House Bill 1309. So House Bill 1309 is about healthcare plans and healthcare coverage. It specifically is about gender affirming care health coverage. And what it says is that all healthcare coverage plans in Colorado have to cover gender affirming care. And there's no age restrictions on that. So one of the House Republicans ran an amendment to say, okay, if the healthcare coverages are going to cover gender affirming care, it can't cover gender affirming care for people under 18 years old, children. And that amendment was struck down, was voted down. And if you actually look at House Bill 1309, it's very specific about what gender affirming care is. So it actually lays out its hormone therapy, its chest, breast augmentation and reduction. Rhinoplasty is one of them. And then, I mean, there's about 10 different things, but I think maybe the most disturbing one is genital surgical procedures. And so, the argument that I made at the well was when we talk about this transgender issue, especially in relation to kids, I've heard time and time again from members across the aisle that they are not doing these breast reductions or these genital surgical procedures on people under 18. They just keep telling me that's not happening. Yet we're going to pass a bill that says your healthcare plan has to now cover that for kids. And so when I got up there, I said, which is it? You guys say it's not happening, but now you're saying my premiums are going to go up for my healthcare plan because as insurance works, it's going to have to cover other people's procedures. And so now you're essentially making me pay more for my plan to cover something that I vehemently disagree with. And then there was a fourth bill that has to do with out-of-state cooperation. So for example, one of the examples used in the bill is if, let's say, the abortion pill is banned in Texas and you live in Texas and you order abortion pills from Colorado and they get mailed to your house and somehow, Texas finds out and they try to investigate it. And then they reach out to the state of Colorado and they ask Colorado about, hey, we need some information from you. It directs the courts they're not allowed to assist with out-of-state investigations on that matter, which I think is a violation of Article 4, Section 1 of the U.S. Constitution, which is the full faith and credit clause. And the whole purpose of that clause says that states will recognize court rulings from other states. That's how we stay together as a union is our courts are intertwined in a way, even if they're only state courts. And so, we do that with extradition, right? If you have a warrant out for your arrest in a different state and then that state arrests you, they follow that warrant in the state where it was issued and they'll send you back there. So, I mean, that's how we stay together. That's how we stay cohesive. And so this bill just says, no, we're not going to do that in relation to abortion related investigations.
Wow, that is quite a lot.
It is.
But I've learned a lot.
And that was just a Sunday.
Right? Yeah. My goodness. So I guess a final question would be, what would you encourage citizens who are wanting to get engaged to do, especially if they work a job and can't necessarily take a day off to go up to the Capitol?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and thank you for that. So what citizens can always do is they can always email and call, write, social media, however you want to do it, your legislators. Personally, as a legislator myself, I like emails because the phone lines, it gets filled up, right? Like you have so many messages, you can't get to them all in time, or the voicemail inbox is full. I like seeing the emails personally. So write your legislator and let them know how you feel about it. You can submit written testimony. So if the bill gets assigned to a committee, then you can submit written testimony if you can't be there that day. We also are very flexible with actually testifying. So it's always better to be there in person. However, the problem with that is that you may be waiting there. We had some committees this week and we went really long on the floor and people got there at 10 a.m. thinking that they're going to be testifying around 10:30 and they were testifying around 7 p.m. So what you can do is you can actually sign up to testify and you can select online. And then what you do is just keep track of kind of where it's at in testimony. And it's like a Zoom and you sign up to testify and you just kind of wait your turn. And when it's your turn, the admin who controls the online testimony, they'll let you into like a lobby and then you'll be able to hear and see the committee and then you'll be able to testify that way. So it's always better to literally let us hear your voice. If you can't, you can always submit written testimony and then always emailing your legislators as well. It's kind of the best way.
Well, thank you, Jarvis. Appreciate your time. And
Yep.
Congratulations again. And we appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Anytime.
Thank you for listening to the Engage the Rockies podcast, your go-to podcast for local and state issues concerning Colorado.